The cold morning sun spilled across the cracked sidewalks of Eastwood, a quiet town where nothing much ever happened, especially not for someone like me, Ryan Malik. 27 years old, I lived in a small two-bedroom apartment above a dusty bookstore owned by a retired professor who paid me in cash and stories. I wasn't rich, but I had enough to pay rent, buy groceries, and occasionally treat myself to a strong coffee from the corner cafe. I woke up every morning with the same routine: brew a cup of black coffee, stare out the window at the rows of parked cars lining the street, and wonder if today would be the day my father acknowledged me. It never was. You see, my father, Asa Malik, was a self-made business tycoon, founder of Malik Industries, a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. To the world, he was brilliant, charismatic, ruthless. But to me, he was something else entirely. A fortress I could never breach. He never saw me as his equal, let alone his heir. He always said I was too soft, too emotional, too much like my mother. My mother, Layla, had passed away when I was just 11. After that, it was just me and him and the silence. A brutal, judging silence that followed me through school, through every small achievement I hoped would earn a pat on the back that never came. I grew up in his house, yes, but I never belonged to his world. I worked odd jobs after college, mostly because my father refused to fund my pipe dreams, as he called them. You want to write? Be a poet, he scoffed one night during a family dinner, glass of scotch in hand. Dreams don't pay the bills. The world doesn't owe you anything, Ryan. Especially not my name. That night still echoed in my bones. My cousins had laughed, polite, hidden laughter, but I felt it. I shrank inward, cheeks burning. That was the last time I attended a family event. Still, I didn't give up. I wrote when I could. Freelanced for magazines. Tutored students. I even started a little blog that gained traction for its honest, raw reflections on grief, ambition, and identity. Strangers messaged me. Some said my words saved them. But the one person I wanted to impress never read a single post. My best friend Zoya always told me, "Ryan, your dad is a prison. You've got the keys. You just don't know how to use them." She was the fire I didn't know I needed, fierce, sarcastic, and utterly loyal. She believed in me with a kind of stubbornness that I envied. One Sunday morning, as we sipped coffee on the rooftop, she asked, "Why don't you leave this place? Move to Lahore or Karachi, somewhere your father's shadow can't follow you." I looked at her, half smiling. Because even if I left, it'd still be with me. Until I prove to him, and to myself, that I'm worth more than his approval, I can't run. Zoya sighed, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then stop waiting for a green light. Make your own road. I thought about that a lot. Still, every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me hoped it was him. That maybe, somehow, he had read something I'd written. That he'd seen me. But the calls never came. Then something strange happened. It was a Tuesday evening when I received a call from Mr. Shah, one of my father's longtime business partners. His voice was low, deliberate. "Ryan Beta, I thought you should know your father's making moves to transfer ownership of Malik Industries." I blinked. "To who?" "Your cousin Saad. He's announcing it this Friday. At the company gala." The room spun slightly. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. "Why are you telling me this?" There was a pause. "Because I've known you since you were a child. Your mother would have wanted you to have a seat at the table. You deserved more than this." I hung up and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. So, it was final. My father wasn't just ignoring me. He had officially written me off. Given my legacy away. I should have been numb. But instead, something inside me snapped to life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, pulled out an old leather notebook my mother gave me when I was 12, and began to write, not poetry, but a plan. A plan to prove him wrong. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I needed to become someone that couldn't be ignored. Someone even Asa Malik would have no choice but to recognize. The next morning, I skipped coffee, put on my cleanest shirt, and stepped into the world with one thought in mind. If I wasn't born worthy of his fortune, I'd build something so powerful, so undeniable, that I wouldn't need it. Something was shifting. The air felt different. The ordinary world I had clung to, the quiet bookstore, the part-time gigs, the longing for approval, was already crumbling. And somewhere in that quiet collapse, a new version of me was beginning to take shape. The announcement was set for Friday, just 3 days away. My cousin Saad, the golden child, was about to be handed Malik Industries on a silver platter. A man who had never worked a single day outside of luxury offices and weekend parties was about to receive the keys to an empire built from the sweat of others. And I was supposed to smile and fade into the background. Not this time. I spent that Tuesday night drafting a plan, messy, chaotic, but alive. I would create something of my own. Not a blog, not a side hustle. I needed a business, something that would slap the air out of the room when my name was mentioned. Wednesday morning, I called Zoya. "I need you," I said, skipping past greetings. She yawned. "For what? Is this a coffee emergency or a life-changing one?" "Both." She showed up in 15 minutes, hair still wet from the shower, in oversized sunglasses and sneakers. When I told her what Mr. Shaw had said, her jaw tightened. "I knew your dad was arrogant, but this is war." I nodded, pacing the floor. "I need to build something fast. Something real. But I can't do it alone." Zoya leaned back in her chair. "What are we talking about? Tech startup? A consulting firm?" "Something meaningful. Something that uses my skills. Writing, branding, messaging. Let's create a full-service storytelling and media agency. Something that helps small businesses, personal brands, even artists find their voice." She raised her eyebrows. "You want to create an empire out of words?" "I want to create impact. And I want to do it loud enough that even Azam Malik has to turn his head." Zoya grinned. "You really are dangerous when you're mad." "I'm in." We spent the rest of the day brainstorming names. After hours of scribbling on whiteboards, we landed on one that hit home. Resonance. Because that's what I had lacked all these years. Resonance with the man who raised me. If he wouldn't hear me through blood, I'd make sure he heard me through the world. We mapped out a business plan, our services, pricing structure, our target market. Zoya had worked with startups before. She understood pitch decks, marketing funnels, and outreach strategies. I focused on creative direction and content, something I had mastered through years of freelancing and surviving. But we needed capital. Fast. I emptied my savings just under $2,000. Zoya added a bit more from her freelance design gigs. We knew it wouldn't last long, but it would get us a website, a logo, and enough advertising to start pulling in clients. Then came the next challenge, exposure. We decided to throw a pop-up event that Friday evening. Yes, the same night as the Malik Industries Gala. Our version of a launch party. We rented out the back room of a downtown co-working space, invited every local business owner, artist, and content creator we'd ever crossed paths with. We framed it as a creative revolution, a space where stories mattered more than titles. The invites went out that night. Digital flyers flooded Instagram. Zoya pulled in her connections. I wrote a blog post about the importance of reclaiming your narrative, which started gaining traction fast. But as our momentum grew, so did the opposition. Thursday afternoon, I received a message from Saad. "Saad Malik.
Ryan.
Heard about your little agency. Hope this isn't another one of your dramatic experiments. Some of us actually work for a living." I stared at the message, then smiled.
Good.
Let him feel threatened. But that wasn't the real blow. Later that night, Zoya called me, voice tight. "Your father. He called the venue." "What?" "He tried to have our event shut down. Said it was a copyright violation. Accused us of using Malik Industries branding, which is ridiculous." My heart pounded. Did it work?
No.
I talked them down. "We're still on. But he's watching you, Ryan. He knows." I sat down, the weight of it all pressing into my chest. I had expected resistance, but I didn't expect it this soon, or this aggressive. "He really wants me erased," I muttered. "No," Zoya replied. "He wants you scared." There's a difference. The next day was a whirlwind. We prepped for the event all morning, printed banners, set up stations for storytelling consultations, arranged a short panel talk. Friends showed up to help. The energy was electric, buzzing with something bigger than revenge. And then, just before we opened the doors, someone I hadn't seen in years walked in. Mr. Shaw. He gave me a slow nod, looking around the room. So, this is what you've built. I stepped forward, unsure of his intentions. It's just the beginning. You've got eyes watching you, Ryan. Your father thinks this is noise. I think it's something else.
He paused.
If you keep going, he won't be able to ignore you for long. The event kicked off at 7 p.m., the exact hour the Malik Gala began uptown in a glitzy ballroom. But instead of chandeliers and champagne, we had passion, creativity, and grit. By 8 p.m., the room was packed. Entrepreneurs were signing up for branding packages. Local influencers were tagging us online. One small business owner, a woman who ran a handmade jewelry shop, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. I've been trying to get noticed for years. You've just given me hope. That was the moment I knew we had created something real. But the night wasn't over. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. Stop before you embarrass yourself further. This won't end well. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Maybe it was my father. Maybe it was one of his lapdogs. Either way, I wasn't backing down. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing his approval. I was building something of my own. And whether he liked it or not, the world had begun to notice. The morning after our launch event, the air felt different. I woke up not to dread or doubt, but to possibility. My inbox was overflowing with client inquiries. The post I'd written the night before had gone semi-viral in the local business community. But most shocking of all, one of the region's largest entrepreneur podcasts, The Founders Table, had shared our story. They wrote, "Two young creatives just shook the foundations of legacy business with nothing but vision and fire. Meet the duo behind Resonance, disruptors in the making." Zoya was screaming into the phone. "We made it. People are noticing. You're trending, Ryan." But that joy came with a shadow. Because that same morning I got a call I didn't expect. My father. His voice was like cold metal. "Come to the house." I paused. "Why?" "You've made a public mockery of yourself and this family. Let's talk before you do more damage." I considered saying no, hanging up and continuing my life. But something told me this was the moment everything could shift. I arrived that afternoon. The house looked the same: marble floors, pillars that screamed importance, and portraits of ancestors glaring down as if daring you to measure up. My father was in his study, where he always had the upper hand. Saad was there too, of course, leaning smugly against a leather chair, in an expensive suit that looked more costume than clothing. "What is this, Ryan?" my father asked, gesturing to his laptop. "Your circus? Your rebellion. It's a business. One I built. One that's making money. And noise. You used our name." "I used my name." His eyes darkened. "You think making a few Instagram posts and helping a handful of small brands qualifies as success? This is not sustainable. You're not thinking like a man of legacy. And you're not thinking like a father." That made him pause. I looked him dead in the eye. All my life, I wanted to be part of this family, this empire. I waited for you to see me, not as a mistake, not as the kid who didn't follow your script, but as someone with value.
But now?
"I don't need your empire. I'm building mine."
Saad scoffed.
"Empire? Bro, you rented a co-working space and threw a party." I turned to him, calm. "You inherited a title. I earned a following." And then came the twist I didn't see coming. Mr. Shaw entered the room. I see everyone's here," he said, setting down his briefcase. "We need to talk. Privately, with both of your sons present." "Why are you here?" my father asked, annoyed. Mr. Shaw looked at me, then back at my father. "Because your will needs updating." The air shifted instantly. "What are you talking about?" Saad asked, his face paling slightly. Mr. Shaw smiled thinly. You instructed me years ago to manage a side trust for Ryan in case he ever amounted to something. And he has. His business has gained valuation. His clients include 4 former Malik Industries accounts that shifted to Resonance, and his public presence is growing. My father's lips twitched, but he stayed quiet. I took the liberty, Mr. Shaw continued, to assess his venture independently. And I must admit, I was impressed. I see leadership, vision, adaptability. He's not only an asset to the family name, he's a threat to it if ignored. You're suggesting I what? Rewrite my will? My father asked, his voice taut. Yes, Mr. Shaw replied, folding his hands. Or be prepared for the consequences. I blinked, stunned. Mr. Shaw turned to me. I wasn't sure about you at first. But you proved something most heirs don't. You created your own weight in gold. Saad exploded. This is insane. He's manipulating all of you. This business won't even last a year. I stayed quiet, letting Saad unravel. Then Mr. Shaw dropped another bombshell. We've been approached by an investor who saw the Resonance story. He wants to fund expansion nationwide. He didn't even ask about Malik Industries. He only asked about Ryan. My father stood in silence. No anger, no shouting, just silence. And I realized something. He wasn't mad. He was afraid. For the first time, I was no longer the boy he could overlook. I was a man who'd built something he couldn't control, and that terrified him. I'm not here to fight you, I said softly. But I won't shrink to make room for someone else's idea of who I should be. My father turned away. You want the world to see you as independent, fine. But don't come crying when it fails. I won't, I replied. Because it's already working. And with that, I walked out of that mansion not as the disowned son, but as the man they couldn't deny anymore. The twist wasn't that I had to prove myself to my father. The twist was that I no longer needed to. The weeks that followed felt like a storm, powerful, chaotic, and alive with movement. Resonance went from being a local whisper to a regional roar. Our inbox was flooded. Former Malik clients reached out, requesting a pitch. Small brands that had once struggled with visibility now had viral campaigns under their belt, thanks to our fresh, story-first strategies. And just when I thought we were getting our footing, a major brand, one Malik Industries had been chasing for years, reached out. Nexus Wear, a rising streetwear company with national traction, wanted us. Not Malik.
Us.
I was in disbelief. Zoya and I danced around the office, screaming like kids who just found a golden ticket. Nexus Wear offered us a contract that would shift everything. Full creative control, 6-month campaign launch, and a branding budget larger than our entire yearly forecast. It was the moment we had been working toward. But I knew, deep down, the real moment hadn't happened yet. That came when Malik Industries caught wind of it. They were blindsided, unprepared, and scrambling to pivot. And so it came to this. A pitch-off. Nexus Wear wanted both agencies to present. 2 teams. 1 campaign. 1 winner. It was a televised event for a private audience, but with high stakes. The winner would not only get the contract, they'd shape the brand identity of one of the most influential Gen Z companies in the country. The morning of the pitch, I stood in front of the mirror. My heart was racing. Zoya walked up behind me and straightened my collar. You ready to burn the old house down? She whispered. I nodded. Let's build our own fire. The venue was sleek, glass-walled, corporate. As we walked into the room, I saw my father sitting in the front row beside Saad. Their team looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury brand catalog. I looked at ours, diverse, vibrant, expressive. We weren't just here to win. We were here to redefine. Malik Industries went first. Their pitch was predictable: statistics, charts, authority, legacy. It was polished, I'll give them that, but cold. Then it was our turn. I stepped up to the stage and did something I'd never seen my father do. I told a story about the kid who was always called too emotional, too different, not serious enough. About the street vendor in Karachi who wrapped his entire product in personality because he couldn't afford packaging. About culture, connection, identity, movement. I didn't speak to the boardroom. I spoke to the audience's soul. When we showed our concept, bold, unapologetically Gen Z, rooted in authenticity, identity, and rebellion, the room went silent. Then it exploded in applause. Even the Nexusware founders stood up, clapping. My father didn't clap. He didn't move. Just watched, as if watching something fall, or maybe something rise. Later that day, the results were emailed. We won. Nexusware chose resonance. Not just for the campaign, but for who we were. That evening, I got a message from my father. Just 5 words. Come see me. Alone. I hesitated, but I went. Back to that house. Back to the study. He was standing, glass of whiskey in hand, looking out the window. I taught you how to fight, he said. No, I replied. You taught me how to survive. I taught myself how to fight. He turned, eyes heavy. You proved me wrong. I stayed silent. You were right, he admitted. About legacy.
About people.
About what matters now. I held on to the past so tightly, I didn't see the future walking out my front door. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, another part wanted to hug him. But I just stood there, grounded in myself. Mr. Shah is updating the will, he said flatly. You'll be on it, equal share. If you want it. I looked at him, this time with clarity. I didn't come here for that. I already built something that's mine. That no one can take away. He nodded slowly. That's why I'm offering it now. Then he said something that stopped me cold. You've become the man I hoped Saad would be. That broke something in me. Not out of joy, but grief. For all the years spent waiting. For all the love that came too late. I'm not doing this to replace anyone, I said. I'm just finally choosing myself. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But we stood in silence. And that silence was enough. The confrontation I always feared had become a conversation I never expected. I had faced him, not to defeat him, but to free myself. And in doing so, I won something far more valuable than inheritance. I won myself. The days that followed felt different. Not because the noise stopped. If anything, it got louder. Interviews, podcast invites, influencer collaborations, and curious investors knocking on our doors. But inside me, silence. A peaceful, rooted silence. Resonance was thriving. We opened a second office in Lahore to tap into South Asia's creative youth. Our social media exploded. Former interns at Malik Industries applied for positions with us. And as surreal as it sounds, a few even said they left because they wanted to work somewhere with soul. That one hit deep. We weren't just building a company. We were building a movement. One where dreams weren't filtered through legacy, bloodlines, or last names. One where storytelling was currency. Where being different wasn't a flaw, it was a strategy. A few weeks after the Nexusware campaign went live and broke sales records, I sat in the exact same cafe where this all began. Zoya slid into the seat across from me, holding 2 cappuccinos. To the dreamers who didn't quit, she said, raising hers. To the ones who proved them wrong, I added. We clinked mugs. A pause. Then she asked, do you ever think about what would have happened if your dad had believed in you from the start? I smiled faintly. Every day. But maybe I needed to believe in me first. We didn't need to talk about Malik Industries anymore. Their time was fading. Slowly, like a sunset behind tall buildings, beautiful in its own way, but eventually swallowed by the night. A week later, I got another message from my father. Not an apology. Not an invitation. A request. He wanted to attend one of our talks. Quietly. No cameras. No press. Just him in the back. I said yes. He sat in the second-to-last row during our keynote at a youth entrepreneurship summit. I didn't acknowledge him on stage. I didn't need to. But as I walked off, I caught his gaze. And this time he smiled. Not the proud, performative kind. The real kind. The one I had spent my whole childhood chasing. The one I'd finally stopped needing. That night, I went home to my small apartment. The same one I'd rented with Zoya before Resonance even had a name. We had talked about moving somewhere bigger, better. But somehow, it still felt right. I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote the words I never thought I'd write. He said I wasn't worthy of his fortune. Turns out I didn't need it. I built one of my own. Richer in meaning, fuller in purpose, and mine in every way. I closed the book. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had anything left to prove. The boy who once stared at his reflection, wondering if he'd ever be enough, had become the man who defined his own worth. My father's validation used to be my finish line.
Now?
It was just background noise in the symphony I was composing. Sometimes, your greatest transformation isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Weeks later, I stood on a TEDx stage, sharing my story with the world. I talked about legacy,
Ego.
rejection, and the sweet, subtle power of choosing your own voice. The crowd stood before I even finished. I stepped off stage, exhaling. This was the real inheritance. The power to rewrite your story, to rise from the ashes of doubt and craft something breathtaking. Not in their name, in your own.